Yeah, so it's interesting. We just went to a conference where there were a lot of bodybuilders type, and a lot of the talks were about the muscle development, even musculoskeletal, strong bones, strong muscles, and then our point was always, look, this is all cute.
Yeah.
But what about cellular health? And we actually have a logo of a cell with biceps. I'm like, those are the muscles you want to see on your cells, because really cellular aging determines how we're going to age. We're just talking to Dr. Slovak about electrolytes. And what did we talk about? We're made out of trillions of cells. So at the end of the day, your cells age will depend how your body ages. So having all this, and again, I'm gonna go back to DNA methylation a little bit. What is the percentage that it affects aging? It's a pretty high one, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's hard to put a number on that. Going back to, I think, what Carlos was talking about before, where we talked about predisposition, right? Do your genes affect your outcomes? Some of these earlier clocks said that about 30% was heritable. So 30% is based on, some of those changes. As we get better and better clocks, that number keeps going lower. And so it looks like you have even more change. And there are a couple of really cool experiments that also can show us a little bit about that process.
But I think this is huge, and I think you like, especially being a physician, like it's talked about so much. Oh, it's hereditary, right? Like
Powerless,
and you feel powerless. Like, oh well, my mom had it, so I'm predestined. And then the person starts to identify with it, and you internalize it, and it becomes even worse. This is such a powerful weapon to kind of free people from those bonds.
Well, I mean, I think the hereditary thing, it's really the genes that you're passing on, and you continuously activate them, but now we have the power to turn those genes off by making the epigenetic changes in our life.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So just to make sure, because I kind of heard this before, and people can still get confused. Again, the genome is the piano, is the keys. But the key player is us, and depending on what we do, we can play endless amount of different symphonies and activate different genes in our body depending on how we instrument our way through life.
Exactly. I like that. Yeah, I really like that. I haven't heard that particular analogy, but I think it is perfect, right? We're talking about, what can we do to have the best symphony, right? I think how can we not only make it a high quality, but also a long one, right? Take that enjoyment, and I think that's a really good analogy.
Again, short, quick, and painless.
Well, and so that the viewers understand what we're talking about is a limited amount of genes that we all share, which is the 88 keys on a piano, but you can play jazz, you can play classical music, you can express it any way you want, right?
Or you can play horrible music.
And then die fast.
Completely off key.
Now, so DNA methylation is one. What about glycation?
Yeah.
Sugar, because I know that's a big marker of aging. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of ways to measure the biological process of aging. Glycans are certainly one of them.
Can you tell what glycan is a little?
So I'm trying to think of a way to do this.
Simple for the mere mortal.
Yeah, basically it's how we attach sugar molecules to other things in our body. And sometimes we like to do that. Sometimes it helps to give us structure to cells. Other times it can be a bad thing. If it happens particularly in our bloodstream and our arteries, that's called these age glycosylated end products, or AGEs, and that can make our arteries stiff and cause atherosclerosis. And so that is certainly a process which happens with age. Sometimes, again, it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. It is a hallmark of aging, just like telomeres, but it's not the most predictive hallmark for everything. It might be more predictive for certain diseases like diabetes, which are dysfunction of glucose and sugar. But generally, I would say that right now, they're not as predictive of outcomes. And it mimics what we can also do with telomere length. So many people who have heard of age biomarkers probably know about telomere length, right? They're basically parts of our DNA that just get shortened over time as our cells replicate. And if they get too short, they cause a lot of problems. And so that's definitively a hallmark of aging. We know it happens with age, and that it can be measured and correlates to almost every negative process, but it's not very predictive of those outcomes. So if we see someone with low telomere length, we're not really sure what's going to happen to them, right? Whereas with DNA methylation, it's a lot more predictive of outcomes. And it's and the other thing is that sometimes glycosylation or can be treated relatively easily with a couple interventions. Things like estrogen, for instance. Estrogen estrogen with some glycomics age tests can decrease age by 30 or 40 years, which sounds great, but at the same time, we know that estrogen's not extending lifespan by 30 or 40 years alone. And so it might be that we're gaming the test, so to speak. Again, glycans is a biomarker, incredibly important. Testing them throughout the future is going to be, another precise diagnostic. But I think that for biological age right now, methylation tends to have a little bit of the edge.
So methylation really has much more to do with the biological aging.
Well, and it's also giving us feedback into the glycosylation process. So I can actually predict glycans with just methylation alone.
So let me just try to nerd out because I'm with the ultimate nerd. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
So, and just so people get the perspective of how complex we are in one single cell. So within one single cell, we contain 46 chromosomes, 92 telomeres, and 3.2 billion nucleotide letters per parent. So we have roughly 6.4 billion letters. And if just one telomere gets critically shortened, the cell goes cytotoxic and senescent, meaning it rots. Just one single cell. Right?
Just one.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
What you said?
And then that cell.
That was pretty damn good.
Yeah, it was pretty great. And then that cell also acts as a signaler to all of the other cells around it, right? So if that cell, so if that cell gets senescent, it creates this process.
It's like a basket.
Inflammaging, right? Inflammaging, where it's just telling all the other cells, be in defense mode, sort of, and that can make the entire process a little bit worse.
And do we have 20 or 30? Because hey, 20, 24, 30,000 genes. How many genes do we actually have? We still don't really know that.
So functional genes versus non-functional genes. We have some people. We have retroviruses that add in genetic elements. So it can be very different. But I think that goes back to the differences in aging, right? How we all age slightly differently. And going back to that, the jazz analogy versus the blues or whatever we might talk about. That's another thing that's important in aging. And so going back to some of the algorithms that we have that maybe differentiate that, we even created an algorithm with Yale, which is called systems age, which has different agiotypes. So for instance, someone might have a liver that's causing them to age quicker. Some people might have skin that looks terrible and is causing them to age. And so now we can actually even provide resolution just in terms of, just your overall body's age or your rate of aging, but what type or what systems are aging in you the most. And this is brand new research from Yale. It was literally just published 6 months ago, but we can actually give you an age of each of your organ systems that are trained off of the classical biomarkers that you're probably using in your clinic all the time. Things like cystatin C or inflammatory markers or your kidney filtration rates. All these are what make up these individual aging factors.
Which is important because as we're treating the person based on the 10 hallmarks or 12 hallmarks of aging, not everybody's the same.
Exactly.
Some people have deficiencies in some, and not so you can't treat everybody with the same kind of cookie cutter protocol. This is a way to measure it. Where's the area of concern? Let's address that and then create a syntax.
Exactly right. And I think that this is why we're talking about personalized medicine, right? It used to be that if you were 10 years younger or you were 10 years older, we tell you the exact same things to do because we know that we tend to know what's good for aging, right? Because we've seen it play across, hundreds of years of civilization. We know what, and we're trying to find, what diets are best, what nutrition, what exercise regimens, and we're starting to get more sophisticated. But what we're doing now is actually looking at the individual cellular process and saying, what should you do or what should you look at? And so the systems age is great for that. I also like our newest algorithm with Harvard that again was just published, a few months ago, which can actually give you individual resolution to what biomarkers you might want to change and how to incorporate that into the aging process.
Just so we make sure, because I don't think we did say it, the hallmarks of aging are the fundamental problems in our biology that occur with aging, right?
Absolutely.
Just to make sure, because we're throwing around hallmarks of aging. People are,
I'm also going to throw another term because, we talk about methylation. And, there's been a lot of talk on TikTok and Twitter and all this stuff with this, gentleman, Gary Brecka. We've all seen him. And the reason why I bring him up is, it's just because we've gotten a lot of calls about people talking about, oh, have you guys watched Gary Brecka? I need a methylation test. So how did what you do difference from his little niche that, it's blowing up all over the internet? I think that's important to understand.
Definitely. And I can completely agree because with aging, you can invite a lot of skepticism, right? Some people might, even until the World Health Organization started to classify this as an ICD-10 code, people might not have even considered aging, a factor worth measuring, right? We know it's correlated, but, can we change it? Can we actually affect change? And so I think we always need to be based in science and realistic expectations, right? Because, if people are saying, coming to your office and saying, hey, I want to look like I'm 20 again, they're in their 50s, that's going to be a hard thing to do, right? And that's because, maybe at one point in time we'll have the tools to do it, but we also have to stay in the realm of science and fact. And I think that one of the things that I really want to talk about is lifespan prediction, because, this is a hard thing to do. So we just released our newest algorithm I just mentioned in Omic Age with Harvard. And really what we did is we looked at biomarker-related changes of these hallmarks of aging in 60,000 people. And we created a way to just predict age or time of death with things like their EMR records. And we did this in a way that was better than any other method. So we actually can predict death now with our Omic Age within 10 years at a 92% accuracy. So we can tell you if you're gonna, are you gonna die in the next 10 years with a 92% accuracy. Wow. That's a pretty big step in the right direction, because again, for chronological age, you might be able to do that to some degree, right? If someone's in their 80s, you can say there's a high likelihood because we know the average lifespan is in the 70s, right? But we can actually do it now molecularly. Chronological age is only effective at a 10-year prediction at 74% of the time, versus 92%. We're almost a 20% increase in our predictive rate by measuring something biological versus just using that chronological outcome. But we also can't really predict that if someone's in their 30s or their 40s. Death prediction to a month or to a week or to really any finite resolution is a really tough thing to do, because there are a lot of reasons that people pass away. And so for a lot of these biological age clocks, I think there are two things to keep in mind. One is that it's really, really difficult to predict those outcomes. And whenever we're talking about increases or improvements in these ways to measure, we're talking about minute increases, but they make big differences. They make big differences. And so no one at all is possible to predict death within a month's time. That's if that happened, if that ever happened, insurance companies would kill for that, right? But it's not a reality at this point. But we can still affect change, and we can still use these tools to help us do that. And I think that realistic expectations are important, but also we can make improvements, and that's also important.
So yeah, because of the Gary Brecka thing, I heard a talk where he gave Dana White an 10-year life expectancy. He's like, hey, based on this algorithm, you're gonna live 10 years. So that's not really possible yet.
Not at all. I mean, again, with blood-based biomarkers like they might be doing, and again, we measured everything in these patients, but we had 60,000 people contribute to that. Contribute to that data set, and we still are only 94% effective at 10 years of prediction. Wow. And that's better than anything that's been out there. But it's still so. Whenever people are looking at these things, there's one thing I always recommend, which is these algorithms that we create. They're important mathematical algorithms, but we publish all of them so that people can actually see that they're doing the right thing. And so if you can go to a fortune teller and say, when am I going to die? And they could give you an answer, and you could trust that answer. But isn't it better to know that fortune teller is right 92% of the time, right? Isn't it? Then you might believe them a little bit more. And so again, always go to published data, always go to published algorithms. It's important for this to be science-based so that we don't get into claims of living to 150, 160 without marketing real life solutions. Exactly.
Okay, but wait, so I want to just talk 1 second, because I want to make sure we nip this in the butt, because we're not the gene experts, but we are with you, along with you. We're going to become gene experts. And I just want to make sure I understand this, because the test that Gary Brecka is recommending that I was going to do, which is 5 SNPs, right? The MTHFR, MTR, COM, I forgot the rest. So testing those 5 is not enough to give somebody a real good understanding on their health, on their blueprint?
Oh, absolutely.
Or like, what else is missing? Is he doing it right? And I just want people to understand, is it being done right? If not, let's inform people properly of what we need to do, because I want to do it in my life.
Exactly. And I think that it's important to definitely know those SNPs, right? It can be helpful, and it can change your outcomes, especially if you're exhibiting outcomes like high homocysteine, which leads to cardiovascular disease. At that point, absolutely test, because you want to find the reason. But you all wouldn't just do one test on a patient, right? That's you need to look at a big picture, and so that is certainly an important test, but it's not one that at all can predict lifespan. And even with the other blood-based biomarkers you might do on your typical, hormone panels or your CBCs, that is still not effective enough to really predict lifespan. So if you really want to optimize for aging-related outcomes, you need more specialty diagnostics, and that's what DNA methylation is. But that's also, and DNA methylation will become a specialty diagnostic in a lot of other areas, I think, too.
Amazing.